Right now, there's a deal in place to ease tariffs between the U.S. and China. We're going to examine how these impacts could affect us here in Metro Atlanta. Also, there will soon be some financial relief for those who've been wrongfully convicted. Find out what's in a law ready for Governor Kemp's signature. And tonight, many of Atlanta's most notable citizens will take time to honor a civil rights icon, Ambassador Andrew Young. This is The Take. Let's go. Hello and welcome to The Take. I'm Chesley McNeil, and yep, we got your take for you today, folks. This is where we go above and beyond the headlines, and we look at the why and how stories are impacting you and your community. We invite the experts in to share their takes as well, and we try to have a little fun as we go along. Our top story today, though, it will be the weather and how it will impact you today. We got scattered showers and thunderstorms on the outside as we speak. Some of that rain has been heavy so far this morning, and so you need to be on the lookout, folks. Make sure you get those alerts on your phone, because some of the thunderstorms this afternoon, once we get into the daytime heating, could become strong to severe. So, of course, we keep you updated right here, but also you can get those alerts right there on your phone. More wet weather for you Tuesday, 50% chance for the rain to be around. We're looking at a 30% chance as we head into Wednesday. That'll be during the morning, maybe into early afternoon. Then things will begin to subside. We'll get the sunshine back in here full for your Thursday and your Friday. But look at those temperatures. 88 on Thursday. We're looking at Friday, 90 for the afternoon high. We'll stay in the upper 90s, or upper 80s rather, as we go into Saturday and Sunday, with a few extra clouds moving into the area, and right now a very slight chance for an isolated shower or thunderstorm to be around for your weekend. All right, as we woke up this morning, we learned of a deal between the U.S. and China to roll back the most recent tariffs. For the next 90 days, each nation will cut back on tariffs to each other's country by 115%. That means the rate on Chinese goods coming into the United States plummets to 30%, while the rate on U.S. goods going into China falls to 10%. The two sides have also set up meetings to continue discussions on these trade deals. Earlier today, the U.S. Treasury Secretary seemed pleased at the outcome of this weekend's talks.
Throughout the trade process, we have had a plan. We have a process in place, and now with the Chinese, after this weekend, we have a mechanism for continued talks. So, process, plan, and mechanism.
All right, here now to talk a little bit more about the deal and how it will impact us here in the Metro Atlanta area is friend of the show, Professor Sina Galara. Good to see you again.
Hi, good morning.
All right, let's talk about this big deal, right? And tell us, this was one of the highest rates that we saw as far as the tariffs go to one country and another, and now we're seeing it down to the lowest.
Yes, this was one of the best news we could have gotten for the U.S. and Georgia, as a very supply chain heavy state in the United States. The cutback on tariffs are substantial, and even though it's just a pause, it's a very strong signal that both parties are looking to drop these tariffs substantially. Seems like the 10% is the bottom, or at least that's what the administration states, but still the previous rates was essentially unsustainable, and what they're working towards in the agreement is a testament to the notion that none of the sides of this trade war want or can tolerate extremely high tariff rates, and so this is a fantastic news that we got today.
China seemed to be the focus of this. How much do we rely on China for goods?
Well, substantially. Well, the United States as a whole imports north of $400 billion of goods from China. And that's a substantial portion of the U.S. economy. And it's important to realize that it's not all consumer goods. Some of them are inputs to other manufacturing processes. So there might be many domestic products that also depend on Chinese imports. Now, when you also look at Georgia, that's also is a supply chain gateway, and it's one of the most important states as it comes to international trade. We export $50 billion of goods and import about 150 billion annually. A lot of that from China. China is one of the biggest trade partners of Georgia, And so a lot of the state's economy depends on trade functioning and a lot of goods coming in and going out. It's been estimated that 800,000 jobs depend on all this supply chain. So, any trouble there is bad news for Georgia, and any improvement is fantastic news.
Yeah, we'll take the fantastic news. We're also hearing some rippling effects like the stock futures starting to soar and the U.S. dollar starting to tick up as well, right?
Yes, yeah, exactly. So markets have been really, really terrified because of the possible effect of these tariffs. I've said many times this: if these levels, the old levels, actually are sustained, it could be posing a significant recession threat, and perhaps because of that reason, we are seeing fast resolution. At least there is a lot of appetite to get to deals. Of course, we don't know exactly what will happen in the future, but it seems like there's very strong intent to reach deals and reduce these tariffs, and it's well understood that they're not sustainable.
Do you think where we are now could be sustainable? As you just mentioned, 90 days for this 10% deal, 30% deal. Do you think that that's going to hold, or do you think it may rise back up a little bit, or could go back to where it was?
All we are hearing, we're hearing very clear signs from the administration that they are emphasizing that 10% is their floor. So I would have wanted that floor to be zero, but it seems like 10 is going to be what we have to live with for some time. And so we will definitely have some effect. Not all of these tariffs will be reversed, but 10% is much better than 100% or 145%, right? So we will have some marginal impact on prices, marginal impact on economic activity, but at a much more favorable rate.
All right, sounds good. Professor Galar, we always appreciate you joining us, and we appreciate your insight. Thanks so much.
Thank you very much.
All right, have a good day. All right, earlier today, Pope Leo XIV called for the release of imprisoned journalists and affirmed that he would call the precious gift of free speech and the press. He spoke before an audience of journalists who descended to cover his election as the first pontiff from the United States. Leo received a standing ovation as he entered the Vatican auditorium, and in English, he even dropped a bit of a zinger for his opening line.
Buongiorno. Good morning, and thank you for this wonderful reception. They say when they clap at the beginning, it doesn't matter much. If you're still awake at the end and you still want to applaud, thank you very much.
No, that's right. I know that's right. So the 69-year-old missionary elected in a 24-hour conclave last week used his remarks to gather journalists to call for peace and reject war and give voice to the voiceless. All right, there's a deal between the United States and China. We're going to talk about that coming up to the show, folks. Don't go anywhere. We'll be back right after this. All right, welcome back to the show. There's a deal between the United States and China to ease those tariff battles. And it comes as President Trump heads to the Middle East today with a full slate of topics up for discussion. Joining us now is NBC Washington correspondent Alice Barr, who's been covering politics for years now. And Alice, welcome back to the show. And earlier, we heard the Treasury Secretary on this, he was speaking highly of this deal. Does the White House think this will be the first of a domino effect to fall, and maybe in some of the other trade deals that's going on?
Jesse, I think it's the most important. I mean, this is the one where the trade barriers were so high that Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent said it was essentially an embargo on trade between the U.S. and China. And that's an incredibly important trade relationship to have the flow stopped, essentially. So, yes, I do think that they would say this was one of the most difficult ones to manage. And the fact that actually fairly quickly, once they sat down to the table, they seem to have had a breakthrough bodes well for other discussions. The other two biggest trading partners for the U.S. are Canada and Mexico. And Canada's leader came and met with President Trump last week, I believe. I've lost all track of space and time, but it was in the past couple of weeks. And so, those discussions are underway as well. But there was a lot made of how sticky this particular discussion was going to be with China. China was the only country that retaliated when President Trump announced his reciprocal tariffs that he put out, some weeks back. And the tariffs were so high, so the fact that they knocked down pretty quickly does seem to bode well for the fact if you can get down to the table with U.S. Trump officials and these foreign leaders, they seem to be able to get somewhere.
Sounds good. All right. One of the items that's on the president's agenda is trying to hold out at least that ceasefire between Israel and Gaza. Could the tensions between the president and the Israel prime minister get to some kind of peaceful negotiations here, you think?
Yeah, so what he's looking for, President Trump is pressing for a ceasefire, a lasting peace between Israel and Hamas, of course, in this just horrific war that's been ongoing in Gaza. And there's been some signs behind the scenes of a little bit of frustration between President Trump and Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. The pair has had a very close relationship for some time, but President Trump is, a deal maker, and he's getting more interested in seeing a deal made in Gaza. And Prime Minister Netanyahu has kind of been resisting that. He's been escalating, in fact, the number of troops that would be headed into Gaza. Prime Minister Netanyahu deals with a right-wing coalition in his government that is very forceful in not wanting to pull back in that war until Hamas is completely destroyed. So he has that kind of countervailing influence. And President Trump also has been looking for an opportunity to make a deal on Iran. There's been some frustration there that he feels perhaps that Prime Minister Netanyahu is not on board with that, and Prime Minister Netanyahu, for his part, maybe doesn't want to see the U.S. Moving forward unilaterally. So that's been a little bit of a hang-up, and they'll have to get back together in order to make something, important happen in pausing the violence in Gaza.
Gotcha. Lastly, Alice, I want to ask you, how significant is the announcement about the release of that last American-Israeli hostage from Gaza?
Yeah, extremely important. This is an American-Israeli. He's an Israeli soldier, but has American citizenship. Adon Alexander, he's a young man. His family has been pressing for his release. It was supposed to happen a little bit earlier this year, and then the temporary ceasefire that was in place fell apart. And now this appears to be moving ahead just based on negotiations between the U.S. and Hamas, and again, not including Israel, back to that kind of previous point.
All right. Thanks a lot, Alice. Really appreciate your insight. And with so much going on, we expect you to kind of get lost every now and again with the time frame. You got so much going on. We appreciate you. We really do. All right.
Thank you.
Thanks a lot. All right. Now, on to a major happening today. Today, a who's who of Atlanta's public figures will gather at the Woodridge Arts Center Galleria to honor the legacy of a titan of Agassiz, former UN ambassador, mayor, congressman, and civil rights leader Andrew Young. Here to talk more about Andrew Young's legacy is Gerard Kavov, the president of Andrew Young's Foundation. Welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thank you for having me on the show.
All right. Really appreciate you being here. Let's talk right off the bat. What is it about Andrew Young's life's journey that makes this simply remarkable?
Well, I think when you look at, as you said, the major achievements that he has had in the life, I think the underlying, basis of all those achievements is that he's a deeply, deeply spiritual man. And he's always anchored in the divine, and every public policy that he has done, every role that he has played, there is always a finger of God in his decision making, and that is why I think that he has been able to achieve so many lives in one lifetime. I'll tell you one story. One time I was going with him. We were in the office. He called me and said, "Hey, let's come downstairs and go with me." And I said, "Where we are going?" So I got in the car. He said, "Well, I'm going to meet with President Carter." I said, "Oh, wow. Okay, let's go." And so we stop at a red light, and he sees a homeless man and starts talking to him as if he knew him for a long time. And very, very calm, very composed. Asking him before the light turned green, he gave him $20, and we moved on. Then we went on to meet with President Carter, and when he was talking to President Carter, he was the exact same man. Means the genuineness in his heart, the genuineness in his personality in talking with that homeless person, and the genuineness that he had in talking with the President Carter was the same. And at that time, I realized that he was just a remarkable human being.
Wow. Talk to me about the honor that he's receiving tonight.
It's a great honor. National Jewish Health is a remarkable institution. We're doing a great research work on the respiratory illnesses. And of course, as a foundation, Health and Heal is one of our focus areas. More than him getting the award, I think what is important is that I hope that this honor and recognition to him inspires other people to contribute more towards the organization that help really people of all ages, especially children. And the remarkable research that they are doing is furthered more with other people's contribution.
Yeah, you got some stars coming out tonight, man. You got the current mayor, Andrew Dickens, coming out. You got four former mayors. You got the widow of Hank Aaron, niece of Oprah Winfrey. I mean, it goes on and on and on. What does this say about the star-studded notability for the ambassador?
Well, I'm just thankful to all these stars who have chosen to come to this event. But as you can imagine, Atlanta is a very unique city, and it has had the honor of wonderful mayors. That goes back to 1940s, starting from Hartsfield Jackson. And I think that the tradition of passing the baton continues, and every mayor really picks up and uses it as a stepping stone to get Atlanta into a newer height. And so I think getting all the mayors on one stage is remarkable. And also, it's a fitting. I would say it's a very fitting and well-deserved honor for Ambassador Young.
Yeah, sounds good. All right, Yoav Kamar, president of the Andrew Young Foundation. Thanks so much for joining us, and it sounds like it's going to be a great event.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for having me.
All right, take care. Plenty more stories for you folks coming after the break. This is The Take. You're watching 11Alive Plus. We're back right after this. All right, welcome back to the show. Tens of millions of dollars of Georgia's budget may soon be going to people who've had criminal convictions overturned after a bill to compensate wrongly convicted Georgians quietly passed the legislature in the final hours of the session. 11Alive News investigator Savannah Levins joins me now on The Take to talk to me about this. And Savannah, what can you tell us about this bill?
Well, Chesley, it is something exonerees and advocates like the Georgia Innocence Project have been pushing for years now. Georgia has long been one of 11 states with no law on the books to compensate citizens who are wrongly convicted of a crime. So basically, if you end up serving time in prison for a crime you did not commit, the courts overturn it and they release you. The way things are currently set up, you're pretty much just sent on your way. Now, you could try to get an individual resolution passed through the legislature to be compensated, but it was rare and honestly really hard for that to even happen. And this bill that has now passed establishes a uniform process to pay exonerees. The bill compensates $75,000 per year spent in prison for a wrongful conviction and an extra $25,000 for each year on death row. Now, 11Alive News Investigates calculated if each of Georgia's 51 exonerees since 1989 pursues compensation for their collective 610 years lost, the state would owe around $46 million, Chesley.
Wow. So, Savannah, tell us where this money comes from.
That's a very good question. So the money would come from the state budget. I spoke with Christina Cribbs, senior attorney for the Georgia Innocence Project, and asked her about whether she thinks the state budget even has the capacity to pay out all that money. Here's what she said.
I think the state budget that they approved for this year was around $37 billion. So there's a lot of money there. And there's a surplus as well. So 46, even if it's $46 million, that's kind of a drop in the bucket as far as the entire state budget goes.
All right, so what would the compensation process look like? Does the exoneree just get the money automatically?
No, Chisley, it would not be automatic. So basically they would have to apply. Exonerees have 3 years from July 1st or 3 years from the date of their exoneration, whichever is later, to file their compensation claims. Now they have to submit that claim to the Georgia Office of State Administrative Hearings. Now that court usually deals with things like state disability benefits, child support, etc. So dealing with wrongful convictions and honestly criminal issues in general, going to be new for these judges. And since the process will likely require an attorney familiar with that court, the bill does also allow for exonerees to have their attorney's fees compensated too. Now the DA who prosecuted the original case and the Attorney General will be given an opportunity to file an appeal against each person's compensation claim if they want. Otherwise, the admin judge will just go ahead and make that final call themselves. Now, Chesley, the governor has not officially signed this bill into law yet. Unless he vetoes it by this Wednesday's deadline, it will automatically become law, though. So, unless he takes some action, it's going to automatically happen.
I know you mentioned in your story that it kicks in like after a year, you get so much, after this year, you get so much. Does it make any room for those that spend less than a year time in jail?
For less than a year, it would be basically grandfathered in, so whatever the applicable amount per month would be. But most people who have spent time in prison, Chesley, for wrongful convictions, it's a multiple years thing. I think the average is, 5+ years. Some have been in prison 10, 20, 30, even 40 years or more. So definitely a lot of money that these folks stand to get.
Sounds like a good story that we're going to be tuning into. Savannah, thanks so much. Can't wait to see it. You're going to hear more about this process and hear a perspective from a local man who spent 19 years in prison for a crime he did not commit. And we're going to talk about how he's feeling about it tonight at 6 and 11 o'clock right here on 11Alive Plus. Make sure you tune in for that, folks. Don't go anywhere. Back with my final take right after this. All right, we are looking at rain today, folks, and tomorrow as well. Scattered showers with embedded thunderstorms will be possible as we head into the afternoon. You will get some breaks in there. You may see a sliver of sunshine or two. Going to help to heat us up into the 70s today. Tomorrow, right around 75 degrees, we'll get some scattered showers and thunderstorms once again. That will linger into Wednesday, and I think it'll be around at least Wednesday afternoon before things begin to subside. And we're going to trade in those raindrops for the heat. 88 for the high on Thursday. Friday, we're looking at 90 for the afternoon high, and then we'll stay in those upper 80s as we head into the upcoming weekend with a few more clouds moving in at a 20% chance for showers both Saturday and Sunday. That's the way it looks for now. 87 on Saturday. Sunday, we're looking at 86 for the afternoon high. So we go from rain to summer. Woo, it's going to get hot around here. All right, before we go, my final take. All right, it's not uncommon to hear the news about a recent drafted college football player getting into a little bit of trouble due to all the excitement of making it into the NFL. Not for the second overall pick, Travis Hunter. Leaving Denver this weekend, the almost 22-year-old Mr. Hunter boarded a plane and left a huge mark on a fellow passenger. You see her right there. This woman, her name is Sandy Hawkins Combs. After the flight, after she took to social media and she wrote this. She said, "I had the most wonderful flight home from Denver. I met a nice young man who sat next to me, and he offered to put up my bag in the overhead compartment and help me out with my tray. He was always polite, saying yes, ma'am, and no, ma'am. Anyone would be proud to have him as a son or a grandson. So polite." After seeing all the passengers and how they responded to him, they were asking him for pictures and everything. She finally said, "Who are you?" And he explained who he was. She was so impressed that she is now a Jacksonville Jaguar fan. She said she's going to buy a jersey and she's going to buy some tickets as well. You never get a second chance to make a first impression. Great job, Mr. Travis Hunter. Love that. Good to see the job into the NFL didn't go to his head. More good things to come for him, I'm sure of it. Man, that's good stuff. That's all we have for you today, folks. Make it a great day, and always remember to encourage someone. We'll see you back here tomorrow.